Hey everybody, I'm sorry I couldn't be with you tonight. I will be out at Philadelphia Pride doing some deep research for our Pride episode on June 26th. I'll also be in the streets of Philadelphia out searching for our special guest that night, Zia Angelina, because you know she's going to be out partying it up, enjoying the festivities. So I'm going to go find her and make sure that she is with us on June the 26th. So make sure that you tune in on the 26th for our special Pride episode. Be there. I will. See you around soon. Love you all.
Thanks, Michael, and good luck with that deep investigative research that you're doing into Pride and all things Hot Girl Summer. Tell Zia Angelina we hope to see her soon, too. Folks, in this podcast, we're going to explore ways in which folk magic practices have been used throughout time and history to heal, to protect, and to empower people. We'll talk to practitioners of various folk magic traditions around the world and learn about the different ways in which they use herbs or crystals, rituals, or other tools to connect with the natural world and create positive change in their lives and in the lives of others. We'll also explore the history of folk magic and how it's evolved over time to meet the needs of different cultures. We'll talk about the different types of folk magic, how they could be used for a variety of purposes, such as healing and divination, protection, and more. So whether you're a beginner or a seasoned practitioner, we hope you'll find this podcast more valuable to your practice as we invite you to participate, to ask questions, to share your comments and thoughts about folk magic and how you may have used it to enrich your life. So we hope you'll join us for this journey into the fascinating world of folk magic coming up right after this.
And welcome back, everybody. I'm your host, John Michael Salvato, and with me on our panel tonight, we have Megan Lee, Joel Adifan, Teresa Slawinski, and Brian Peters. As you heard in the beginning, Michael Torres McQueen is in Philadelphia at Pride doing deep research. I've never heard it called that before, but okay. And I'm sure that that he'll come back with news of Zia Angelina for our Pride episode. And unfortunately, I'm going to have to miss that because I won't be here that night due to prior commitments. So I'm sure that Michael and Zia Angelina will have a good time. And so let's just go ahead and jump in. As we said, tonight's topic is folk magic, Catholic conjure, all folk magic traditions. And the reason we wanted to do this, and particularly wanted to do this in June, because it's not only Pride Month in June, but it's also we also have the celebration of Juneteenth coming up, and most, if not all, folk magic traditions arise out of injustice, out of social injustice, oppression, colonialization, all of those sorts of things that try to take the power away from the people. And so I think it's important that we, as a beloved community, as Dr. King would say, as we begin to embrace and take back our power, to hear from voices of folks who are folk magic practitioners and why and how that resonated with them and what led them to that journey. So that will be our first question tonight. What type of folk magic do you practice? What type of esoteric background do you come from? And what do you want to share with us about your specific tradition, briefly before we dive into the meatier questions? And for those who are watching, if you have questions, be sure to ask them in the comments here on YouTube. If you do it on Facebook, you have to give Facebook permission. That's why we mostly suggest YouTube for commenting. But we'll try and put some of those questions as time permits on the screen. So let's go ahead and start with you, Megan. And let's see if I can do this right. Tell us a little bit about your practice.
All right. So my name is Megan, and I am actually a certified nurse midwife in my real grown-up day job living in Honolulu, Hawaii. But as far as background, I was born in South Louisiana, and esoterically, I'm a master cartomancer and cartomancer instructor, with tarot being my main format that I use and also teach. I was born and raised in South Louisiana, immersed in Creole language, Creole culture, Creole food, Creole things. I genetically am Creole, biologically am Creole, but was adopted by a Sicilian family at birth. So I was also raised, with that Italian, Sicilian culture, which is, I guess, really not that different from Creole culture, especially when you're in an area where there are all things Creole, as part of your daily life. I didn't realize until I was almost 40 years old that me being raised Catholic, I actually wasn't raised Catholic. I was raised Benedicaria, um, which I'm sure if you're watching this show, you know what that is. If not, you could probably Google it. But it is very much Catholic folk magic. And it's, I just thought that all of those things were the things that all Catholics were doing. It turns out they're not. And then I thought it was like, this was just my family's particularly, weird superstitions. Turns out it's not, it's a whole sort of thing. It's a Catholic folk magic thing. As an adult, I think I've branched out far beyond that. And while I do have a healthy dose of that within my practice, I also bring a lot of Norse animism into my practice. I have a lot of guides and spiritual allies that are from lots of different, I guess, pantheons, for lack of a better word. I formally studied Wicca and was actually initiated into a Wiccan tradition 25 years ago. That just really didn't resonate with me. So I got way away from anything that had any sort of structure or dogma or rules associated with it, and became way more, I guess, animistic and folky in my practice. But I don't know that I could pin down one specific tradition that I would call my own, because I have such a blended background.
Well, that is such, I mean, just a lot to take in right off the bat. And you're living in Hawaii right now, so
Yeah.
does that play at all in your worldview, your magical practice?
Probably not as much as it should. I feel like, I've always been a believer that, like, wherever you are, you should identify with the spirits of the land. But I am not Hawaiian. My husband is. My husband is Filipino and Hawaiian. So, there's some of that culture that I have kind of integrated into my life, but I am acutely aware that that is not mine. That does not feel like mine. That does not resonate with me. And so that's not really something I bring in, because it doesn't resonate. It just doesn't. Maybe after I've been here for years and years, it might, but it feels very inauthentic to me whenever I really try to incorporate that. It just doesn't feel like me.
Thank you for that. That makes sense. Joelle, tell us a little bit about your the type of esoteric practice that you engage.
So my name is Joel Adifon, and I was born in a little tiny town on the spur of the boot of Italy called San Giovanni Rotondo. It's famous for one thing and pretty much one thing only, and that was the home of Padre Pio for 50 years. My family is from Benin, West Africa, and on my mom's side of the family, there's a royal connection. On my dad's side of the family, there's a connection to warrior chiefs. That's a whole other story. And basically, as I would say my esoteric practice is one of an animistic static. And how that started is I was in a family where prayer, miracles, signs and wonders, spiritual visions was normal. It was a blend of West African charismatic Catholicism and what I would call now Italo-Roman Catholicism, very much prayer to the saints, but also things like speaking in tongues and laying on of hands and things like that. And as I got older, I started to have various spiritual experiences, things like started seeing physical healings happen with people, and I started trying to understand what this all meant. And at a certain point, I realized that while my connection with Jeshua and the saints was very tangible and palpable, it's one that I've wrestled with for various reasons, like colonialism, being a black-bodied person, and really understanding the history of what I call Christianity and Catholicism versus the Christic, which is like the Christ reality, and how that's interacted with people of color. So I've had that experience. I started having different African diasporic and Afrocentric spirits and powers coming to me. And I was like, what is this? Especially because in African context, there's often a tension between the African Christianity and the African traditional religion. And my journey has been one of integrating the two and really finding what my unique place in all of this is. And that has brought me to spirits like San Benedito, who is a famous Afro-Sicilian saint, and other spirits in that context. So yeah, that's my story in a little bit of a nutshell, and that's where I'm at.
That's awesome. And could you speak just a little bit about I got to always remember to take people's names off when we go back to large screen, about the concept of the flying miracles, because I think that's a beautiful and breathtaking part of your work and your teaching.
Yeah, so there's a concept found throughout the diaspora of what is called the flying Africans. And there were stories of all throughout, enslavement in the diaspora and the trauma that happened, where there were Africans that were basically like, yo, I ain't a slave. And they would just disappear and never to be seen again. Some people would claim that they witnessed it. And that is a part of what I've been exploring, simply because coming from a worldview where signs and wonders were so normal, a lot of times there has been in the Italo-Roman, or what I would call like mainstream Roman Catholicism, there's been a lot of investigation of, saints that are maybe white-bodied, or maybe in, the Hindu tradition, that's acceptable. But there's something really unnerving to power of Black people being able to do some feats. And so that, for my own journey, for my own really wanting to see what's possible, I've really gravitated towards stories and really bringing that level of, I don't want to say credibility, and but also verification to that experience. And so, we have saints like Joseph of Cupertino, right? How thousands of people saw this guy fly into the air, like heads of state, kings, surgeons. And there's that level of power and reality in the African diaspora. And one of the things on my heart is people knowing that that's possible. So that's a little bit about that.
Right on. Thank you for sharing that, because I think that's an important part of the story. Teresa.
Yo, I was born and raised in Toronto. And my background, as far as my spiritual path was concerned, being born into a Polish family and being raised Catholic, we were sort of exposed to, as Megan said, a different style of Catholicism. It wasn't your norm, but I thought that that's how all Catholics observed their faith. So there was a lot of, with the like, for example, Easter, with Easter eggs. Okay, there are things that we did at certain times of the year, and again, that depended on time of the year it was that we observed. Like, for example, we have an observance that's quite a ritual and a festival. They call it Dranki, which is a fall festival. And so there was a lot of mix when it came to Polish Catholicism. It was very much a folk Catholic. That's how I always felt it was. But being raised that way, and also coming from the background that I did, and being gifted and being a psychic and a medium, that ran in our family. And so when I used to talk out loud to what my mother used to call my babu and my people, okay, I could visually see them. As a child, I could visually see them. I spoke to them, etc. And because of that, it led me to explore more other faiths, other belief systems. But I think it was also the entourage that I carried with me for the spirits. Okay. And again, being born in Canada, very much exposed to the land spirits here, to the Indigenous culture. And so when I path, it was an exploration of Indigenous belief system, but it wasn't until I met a group of people, being again, Canada founded on Canadian and English background. I came into sort of a cultural group that embraced their pagan background. They were of Celtic background. And so there was a British traditional lineage, okay, Wiccan in back. This was I would say more folk kind of belief system. But anyway, and I just found it wasn't, again, like Megan said, it just didn't fit right. I knew that there was something else. And for me, it was really embracing my own Slavic culture. So at that time, I also had a group of friends who were English background, and we started to do our own research and started to research our own sort of belief system, our own pagan faith, realizing that our Polish Catholicism was a lot of that faith. Very natural for me. So stepping that gave me a framework. I have nothing, to back the lineage that I came from, framework, but it also gave me the ability to work and have a discipline in working. So again, when I had teamed up with a couple of my friends, we formed the Eastern European Kitchen Witches, and we would invite other people from other groups. And Toronto had a huge pagan community, and from Celtic background, Norse background, etc. And eventually a lot of Cuban people. We weren't really associating with them, but that's kind of like when I stumbled onto the more, I would say, Latino traditions. So anyway, as I was saying, so I had an entourage, and when you kind of have that way, come from different cultures, they come from different backgrounds. And much like yourself, Jill Michael, when you said that, someone tells you, well, you can't walk with that spirit, or you can't have that. You don't have a say in that. I'm going to choose you. So this was kind of my experience. But at the same time, I felt I was sort of weighed down by a lot of spirits. And it just so happened that everything that was happening in my life, I kind of stepped away from everything. And that's kind of when my world kind of sort of crumbled. And I just sort of went, whoa, what's going on here? And I ended up at the doorstep of a Santeria practitioner. And I went to him for a reading, and he had told me that I needed to be cleansed. So I did. So I went to the Santero. He did my reading. He did my cleansing and everything was fine and Jim Dandy. And, acknowledging my, I had no problems with, because, coming from a Polish Catholic background, there was a lot of with embracing your ancestors and honoring them. So when I went into the Santeria sort of tradition, it was okay, but again, things were starting to come. There were Orishas coming in, and I felt kind of, wow, okay, this is interesting. And I embraced it like I did everything else, like I said, with my Indigenous drumming groups that then again, something had happened in my life, and it started going out of whack. And Well, I ended up at the feet of Jean Jerome Anifa Babalao practitioner, and that's when I got my hand of Ifa. And from there, again, because of what I am, a medium and a psychic, I was able to explore that more, and I was exposed to does and help in any way, sort of shape or form that I could with my Babalao at that time. But I've sort of taken a step back again, and I'm coming back to my cultural roots and coming back to my own practice, which kind of, you know, a little bit of this and a little bit of that, but it's based basically in my Slavic roots. And this is where I am now. So that's me in a nutshell.
Thank you. Quite a nutshell. That was beautiful, and such a an encompassing story to have gone out there into the world and drawn value from these different cultures, that graciously shared with you, generously shared with you, but then for that to be the road that led you back home,
Yep.
to your culture and to a deeper connection with your ancestors. So thank you for that. Brian, let's hear from you. Brian, who said, well, I think I'll probably be the weird one. I was like, you just haven't been hanging around this group very long.
Well, I've always am the weird one in the room, so I guess for once I'm not going to be the weird one in the room. So I have a very interesting upbringing. I actually started out. I went to an Assembly of God church where everyone's focused on those. I'm going to say those moments where they're speaking in tongues and they're finding those moments when they get touched by spirit and stuff like that. And it never really resonated with me, and so I did that. I did my time there, and then I've had a boyfriend who was dragging me to Catholic Mass and says, you know what, you should be baptized Catholic. You're going to find more spirituality here. This is going to be something that's going to work for you. Did the Catholic Mass, did the baptism. I'm like, well, this is kind of interesting. I'm liking the saints. I like some of the relics. I like some of this energy. And then lo and behold, he went away, and I started down the path with herbs and looking at some more of the witchy path. And then I found some friends that were psychic mediums, and I'm like, well, you guys are kind of cool. And so I started listening to their belief system, started listening to that spirit still has this conversation, that it still wants to work with us on a daily basis and wants us to be able to get in touch and wanting us to affect the world we live in on a daily basis. And, you hear about the ascended masters and you start learning more about this group consciousness and things of that nature. And, getting in contact with your spirit team, looking at more of these real, true spiritualist ideals where, you go to a seance and you hear raps and knocks and you see apports and trumpets movement and stuff like that, that just blows you out of the water. And to be able to sit there and after 10 years be able to have trumpet movement myself is just incredible, because coming from a background where within spiritualism, a lot of people don't realize that it was primarily women led. They were the ones that were at the forefront of spiritualism back in the day, encouraging equal rights. They were speaking for end of slavery and social injustices while they were in cabinet. All these messages were coming from ascended beings. And it was very much common practice for seances to be in the White House during multiple presidents. And it was just this incredible time. And I think myself, being a gay guy, it allows me to tap into a culture that is out there swinging for those that are I don't want to say low man on the totem pole, but I'm going to say it anyways, that are swinging for the low men on the totem pole, or trying to give voice to those that don't have a voice, and knowing that, there's a higher power out there, and it does not matter what skin color, what sexual identity, or whatever the case may be, they're going to work with you just the same. And these people are born with us from the moment we are concepted on this earth to the day that we leave. Our teams assist us in that process. So for me, I look at this as an opportunity to see that spirit's working with us on a daily basis. So a lot of you guys have these incredible stories, and it's just, for me, it's more of my passion led me down this path. And it's like, I really, truly believe that spirit works with us on a constant basis.
Well, I don't know how you could say that that's not an incredible story. That is a beautiful journey.
Yeah.
You know, you're definitely part of my tribe. So I thank you for that. I guess you know, somebody pointed out to me last week that I didn't, or 2 weeks ago, that I never tell people my story, and it's because I always assume that everybody is tired of hearing it, or has heard it, or has read the books and knows the story. So tonight I will actually briefly do that. I was you know, come from an Afro-Sicilian and Hungarian Roma family. Where I was initiated into our practices, into our worldview, at the age of 6, as was the custom in the Afro-Sicilian tradition, and had the beautiful experience of having my grandmother, my paternal grandmother, my paternal aunts and uncles and cousins, there to support me through my most formative years, growing up in Philadelphia and South Jersey, and then moving as a teen or tween down to Central Florida. So I was raised in a Roman Catholic family, but with the understanding that within our family there were sort of two distinct groups, one of whom practiced Catholic Conjure as the sort of as their religion, sort of a reclamation of their power when Italy colonized Sicily and all of southern, what's now southern Italy, the southern kingdom of Sicily. There was a reclamation that resulted on the one end with the mafia, on the other end with this Catholic folk magic tradition, where people were taking back the power that existed for us up until 495 in the Common Era, when Pope Gelasius said, "Oh, sorry, all of you Mother Abbesses who are presiding at Eucharist have to stop." You know, when for 500 years in the institutional church's tradition, women were consecrating Eucharist, they were serving at the altar, particularly in monastic settings, and so there was a reclamation of our power. I felt very drawn to the esoteric side of Catholicism. There was a Catholic, a Benedictine monk by the name of Father Henri Lasso, and every time I mention this story, I hear from more people who, from the South Jersey area, particularly who went to St. Paul's Church, or no, that was St. Michael's before St. Paul's, St. Paul's and St. Michael's Church, that we had this priest come in and do what they call a mission, where they do a series of talks, and his talks were brilliant. They were very esoteric. And they touched on the work that he was doing with Vedic and non-dualistic Hindu teachings. And so he was just amazing. My parents invited him over to the house, as they did everybody, because, you know, the oldest one was going to be a priest. So like they had to invite every priest they could to the house. And he came to the house, and my parents showed him around. They showed him my room. He saw that there was a Buddha in addition to the Infant of Prague, and there was a Shiva Nataraja on and so he was very intrigued. Asked me, you know, how I learned about them. We had a conversation. Long story short, he took my refuge vows. He asked me to be his altar server for the entire week that he was there. And then fast forward to about, I guess, 15 years ago now, when I was 10, in India, he was known as Swami Abhishektananda. And a lot of people are familiar with Abhishektananda. They're also familiar with Swami Dayananda, the Griffiths. Abhishektananda, and I stayed in touch until I was in my probably early 20s. And I truly loved him. And after he left his body, I remained in contact with some of the people at the ashram. And it was only then, like I said, about 15 years ago, that I found out that when he came for a parish mission, that all of my family remembers, that all of our friends that we're still in touch with throughout South Jersey remember, because this priest left a really strong imprint on all of us. The person laughed at the other end and said, you know, I hear stories like this all the time, but I have to tell you that during that period of time, Swamiji never left the ashram. He bilocated and did parish missions all over the world. And this, my mind was boggled. Padre Pio did a lot of the same sort of thing, but not doing parish missions. He went to like people, you know, one on one. This is just an amazing story, Joelle. I'm loving watching you. I'm taking me off big screen because I think the reactions are priceless here. And so, you know, long story short, I became a Franciscan priest. I continued to practice esotericism, and eventually became a Catholic bishop in the Eastern tradition. And then when we left the institutional church to sort of become deconstructionist, following that thread that the first stitch was sewn by Father Henri Lisseau, by Abhishektananda, I felt like my purpose in life was to deconstruct institutional religion and kind of free it and bring it back to where it was in its particularly in its Afro-Sicilian roots, and to deconstruct things like race and deconstruct things like these imaginary socioeconomic hierarchies, so that it reflected more of that message of spirit, or the beloved, loving and caring for each and every one of us, and non-duality being the central focus, that the key that opens that door. So that's my story.
That's quite a beyond Michael.
So if you happen to be watching and you are in a parish where Father Henri Lisseau, he was Belgique, from Belgium, so he had a very distinct accent, and I don't need to say anything more. Like, you can tell me your story and I'll know that story is true based on the details, because there's details I of course left out, because they're even more remarkable. And like I said, I served at the altar with this priest for an entire week, and he literally changed my life. Told me, look, there's a difference between the institutional church and the spiritual path you're on. This is what's going to happen to you. Told me every single challenge and problem that I've had, right up to, and like I am known in Rome. This is how I got excommunicated from the Roman Church, was as a Franciscan brother. I was asked to speak before the Catholic Bishops Conference and the U.S. Catholic Conference of Bishops, and I did, and my speech was repeated the line probably about 100 times. The body of Christ has AIDS, and this was at a time when the church was ignoring those who were living with HIV and AIDS, and I impressed upon them that the body of Christ has AIDS. The bishops weren't having it. Most of them left in the middle of the speech, and they saw to it that my bishop was yelled at and for inviting me, but he knew what I was going to say, and I was excommunicated. But by the time they got around to excommunicating me, I also had been ordained outside the Roman Communion in valid but illicit orders. And my first act as a bishop was to ordain Mother Abbess and one of her nuns from a local priory to serve at the altar, and who we were providing with Eucharist. So I was going to get excommunicated anyway. So I figured if you're going to go, you go with a bang. Yeah, that's my story. So let's use that as a jumping off point, to talk about, we've heard all of these different traditions out there. What are your thoughts about folk magic belonging to the people, ergo folk magic? Is that a closed tradition? Is that an open tradition, and why? So Megan, we'll start with you.
Are you talking about folk magic as the umbrella folk magic, or a particular
practice?
I would definitely not consider my practice a closed practice. I am willing to have anybody who wants to do it. I'll do anything for anybody. People approach me all the time. I have a good friend who just was going through this terribly nasty divorce who needed a really good cut and clear. And I used the best hoodoo cut and clear that I had for her, because that is how I learned to do it. That is the, you know, that Creole, that's that Creole aspect. And, you know, I think there are probably a lot of people that would look at a white appearing woman doing a hoodoo spell and go, ooh, you know, that is a no-no. But I mean, that's my culture. I identify with that. That is very much what I grew up immersed in. It's what I'm comfortable with. It's what resonates with me. And to this day, that's truly one of the most effective and instantly working spells I've ever worked. And it was a really traditional, I mean, I guess some people probably would consider it closed, maybe depending on who you ask. I don't consider anything that I do closed. I think what I do is too eclectic and doesn't fall into one particular category and is too much my own flavor. I practice like, you know, like Megan folk magic, and I'm not going to close that. I'm not going to close it.
I want so much to jump in and comment on that, because I think you just at the very end, you hit on something I was going to say. I very often hear people on social media, particularly pop culture personalities with huge followings on different platforms, conflating magical practice and religious practice based on the fact that you know, Gardner lied and created something out of whole cloth in the 20th century, pretending that it was based on Italian magical practices that had nothing to do. You know, Leland's story was not about witchcraft. I mean, his story was about it, but what he witnessed, if he witnessed it at all, was not witchcraft. He witnessed religion. He witnessed a cult of Diana and Dianus, which has nothing to do with witchcraft, despite what pop culture pretends. But you touched on something that I think is important, and that is that there's a difference, I think, and I'd like to hear your opinion and everyone else's as well. There's a difference between culturally appropriating, and so going out there and saying, well, I'm a hoodoo practitioner, and you don't, if you didn't come from Creole lineage and you weren't properly taught, going out there and profiting from that, you know, pretending that there isn't the Sicilian influence in there too, because the largest lynching in America took place with Sicilians in New Orleans. Yeah, and so there is a closeness that aside from the genetic closeness that exists between our people and African people, there is a closeness in cultures. There's a closeness in what was shared. I experienced that living in a monastery in Metairie. But what I heard you say was that this woman came to you and you did something that you obviously were taught by somebody, and you didn't say, "Oh, I'm going to do hoodoo." And you didn't make an issue of the you know, you didn't call yourself a hoodoo practitioner.
No,
you used a tool that was given to you, and I think that is a whole different thing than culturally appropriating. Having a relationship with a particular working or a particular loa or orisha or other spirit that is part of your spiritual court, it would almost seem wrong morally and ethically to not use that if you have a chance to alleviate suffering. Would you agree or disagree?
Yeah, no, I do agree. I do agree. And I think for me, as from an esoteric standpoint, it's almost been a journey and difficult for me to even figure out where I fit, because I look one way, genetically I am this, culturally I am this, but also culturally I am this. And so I even had a hard time saying, is Italian folk magic for me? Can I have that? And I'm like, well, of course I can have that. I was raised by Sicilian parents with that as my upbringing, but I also was raised immersed in Creole culture with that as my upbringing. and that is my, the ancestors of my blood are Creole and the ancestors of my culture are Sicilian. So I think I can have both, but it has taken me a long time to accept the fact that they're both mine.
What's everyone else think?
I definitely.
And I was going to say, Megan, sorry for interrupting. I think what we see a lot in America is this cultural appropriation, but a lot of that is based on race. I think a lot of people, there are who will go out and say, no, by the color of your skin, may say, I don't think you're allowed to do that. And I don't think that's fair, given the fact that they don't know your background.
No.
And sorry, I'm having some problems here with my phone. Given the fact that they don't know your background genetically, culturally, or anything like that, it would be unfair for them to say that you are not allowed to practice that, okay? And I think with what Gian Michael said, when you have the teachings and the spirits that follow you, it would be almost criminal not to be able to help somebody if that was not part of your repertoire, okay, spiritually. You can't suddenly decide that, a gatekeeper is going to be upset by what I do. No, that's when your spirits come and step forward, and it's almost like they take over. And I think that that's important to acknowledge, the fact that we have to honor the spirits we walk with. And therefore, if there's any help or healings that we can.
Oh, we just lost your mic, Teresa.
I'm going to jump in and say she was talking about things being associated with color of skin. I'm going to say it's also gendered here too, because with me being a psychic medium, a lot of people will come in and they're like, you're a psychic medium, you're a male. It's like, you have that, it's like, it's women's intuition, don't you know? And it's like, no, I hear it every day. Believe it or not, I hear it every single day. We'll even bring people in who are females. They'll get readings just because they're a female over a guy, because they don't believe a guy can be a psychic medium.
It is gendered.
And that's not fair.
So it's like, that's not fair. I have to bust those doors down every single day. And not only am I busting that door down, I have to bust it down that I'm gay male in this role as well. So there's a lot of obstacles that I have to overcome that have nothing to do with the color of my skin, just because what appendage I was born with.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I have two things.
There's amazing.
So I have two things. One, Megan, your story really resonated with me, because as someone who is biologically and ancestrally African and Black, and having a connection to saints and Jeshua because of my Italo-Roman background and some other things with that is a tension that I'm constantly living in. And I've had to really find my path into how to integrate these two, especially when in many ways they've been pitted against each other. So I really resonated with what you said on that. The second thing, John Michael receiving a tool as a gift through a relationship, I thought that was very, very powerful. You can kind of just through that, and I was like, wait a minute, we need to pause, because there's so much there. Like Teresa, I feel what you're saying. There is a difference between a general gatekeeping, but we also live in a world where there's a lot of delusion right now. There's a lot of people saying Erzuli Freda, came to me and now I can do X, Y, and Z. It's like, no, you're gonna get your ass kicked. like, you know what I mean? There's a lot of people claiming to do stuff. There's a lot of people claiming to have real ability. And one of the things that I respect about the indigenous, whether that's Sicilian, whether that's Africa, whether that's even deep ancient Europe, in that world, the receipts speak. So what you can do, what you can demonstrate, what people have witnessed and real feats is the language. And I think that in a lot of cultures, gatekeeping exists for that reason, because there's a lot of people that are going sideways routes. And with the capitalistic market that we live in today, people are charging a lot of money, but can't produce. So those are two things that popped in my head.
Absolutely. I mean, even with us, up across the way from us, we had a young lady who was charging someone $6,000 because their family member was trapped in limbo and they had to use gold to get them out of limbo. And at that point, I'm like, we have problems here. And like, even with me reaching out to the city of Akron to see if the police department could help, and there's nothing we can do. She gave them the money. I mean, it's just, that's 100% exactly what you're talking about. It's like, I think it's one thing to tell people, hey, you know what, you need to be practicing this. You need to have some common sense behind you and be willing to help people versus looking at that dollar figure, 110%.
And there's the other point too. Then we have a lot of people and practitioners who are totally immersed in what they're doing. And I do believe that they're honest about helping people. But again, it comes down to the dollar. And that sort of drives their system. And really, at what point does it interfere, do you know, with the honesty of who they are?
Yeah, and I mean, my thought is exactly what Joelle said. You know, F around and find out. You know, like if you're gonna do that shit, we had a couple people who were members of the faculty of Inner Alchemy Mystery School. One of whom I found out was doing just that, was charging people obscene amounts of money with no results. You know, obscene amounts of money with results would be bad enough because it's unnecessary. Obscene amounts of money with no results, now you're just a con artist. And, right. And another individual who, you know, had a great story about, you know, how Meemaw was a Cherokee Indian, except for the fact that she wasn't. And, you know, those are things that are verifiable. For me, I'll chime in last on this one and say that, you know, I agree with what everyone has said here tonight. And one of the things that one of the reasons I think that I come from that place of being more open, because I was raised and told that, you know, we don't teach publicly until we're 50. There are things you're supposed to keep secret and that never sat well with me, because I you know, I understand the difference between a mystery school teaching, which is a philosophy and it takes time and it's not really being kept secret as much as it's being spoon fed. That's what mystagogy is about in general. But, you know, we're coming from an Afro-Sicilian heritage and identifying more with that than I do with Hungarian Roma, since I didn't know that side of the family. You know, Sicily is a region that, unlike most places that had colonizers from all different countries coming in and taking over at different periods in history, usually you see the people fighting back against those and perceiving those rulers that come in as oppressors. In Sicilia, that wasn't really the case. The case was that yes, there was a fight that was put up in some of those situations, but when the ruler took over, the Sicilian mindset was, let me see what benefits, what fruits can come of this new relationship. And so for me, my spirituality is like that. If I feel drawn to a particular tradition, you know, the way, and I'm not going to go into it. People who've read my book already know the story, but the way that La Santissima came into my life when I was sexually assaulted in 1983, I didn't choose her. You know, that it was La Santissima, Maria Padilla, and Our Lady of the Miraculous Medal, all in a period of like overlapping experiences in that assault. I didn't choose them, but I look at it the way that my ancestors would have and said, what fruit can come of this relationship? Not just what can they give to me, but what can I give back to them? How can I serve them in a way that might uniquely be mine to be able to serve? And so I don't see, you know, you go to Sicilia, you see beautiful Basque architecture, you see Arabic architecture, you see architecture from the Ottoman Empire, from the Greek influence, the Roman influence, all beautifully interwoven into this amazing tapestry that is what it means to be Afro-Sicilian. And for me, my magical practice has to be that way because that's just who my people are. It has to draw from the Basque and the Norman influence and the African influence, and because my ancestors are from Tunisia originally, then that influence just resonates. It's like I say, it's more like the taste. It's my taste in food. It's my taste in music. It's my taste in culture. But that doesn't mean that the other things aren't interwoven into that tapestry to make it all work. So I think I had a feeling just with the group that we brought in that we weren't going to be, and we're way off script on the questions, so those just went out the window, just so everybody knows. Let me look and see. We've got a question from somebody or a comment from somebody. So Little Purple Riding Hood said, this is the difficulty I encountered with all Abrahamic and monotheistic cults. Yeah, I think that, I want to hear from Brian on this, because I think too that there's an aspect, and Teresa can speak to this too. There are aspects of IFA and aspects of spiritualism, like true spiritualism, not that, oh, I'm spiritual, not religious, that are closed, and they're closed for a reason. Does that mean for you that you don't ever talk about it or share the ideology with other people, or what?
I'm going to say absolutely not on that approach. I mean, yes, there are certain things that we do that I'm going to say we have closed circles, we'll have closed groups, but at the same time, we'll still open up on our side, and we'll have public seances. We'll do things to allow other people to come in and experience what's going on. And I mean, even to this day, I mean, you have Camp Chesterfield, you have Lilydale, you have Casadega that's still actively teaching classes and on a lot of this information and presenting it to a lot of different people. And we want those psychic mediums on a daily basis. You know what I mean? We want those people stepping up, learning more about mediumship. And to be honest, there's parts on me where I go, especially looking at some of the more of the traditional Victorian spiritualism points, if that information is not shared, it's going to be lost before anything. It's going to get lost. It's going to get watered down. And really, truly, like I was talking the other day about how, it was women's rights. You were hearing it from the cabinet. You heard Abraham Lincoln sat in a seance the night before the Emancipation Proclamation was signed, was told to sign the Emancipation Proclamation, and then was also told to walk in front of the troops at Gettysburg to give him a morale booster. So for me, that talks, that information needs to be shared and not forgotten, because if that information is forgotten, there's no way to recover it.
Right, exactly. Teresa, what about you?
Most in certain aspects, but that again falls on the individual. For example, it depends on what Orisha basically is. Orishas are around you, and therefore, if you need to be initiated, etc., then it becomes a very closed practice. Okay? So, because there's certain things and certain rituals that are done that really be allowed to be shown publicly, and so it's a closed practice. As far as the spiritual aspect, the spiritualism, the misas, very much so. Not so much in Ifa, I would say, but the Santeria, Sheshe aspect to the action, that in that sense, you can walk with other spirits that are from other cultures, as well as the African spirits themselves. And so for that reason, it can be open, because again, with misas, they are open to people who may need help with, as in my case, when I had worked with Jean Jerome as a Babalao, he had referred people to me and a group of other mediums, and we were there to help, because Ifa can only do so much, but the other spirits, it could be ancestral spirits that need to come forward and speak. And so each of us would step forward and help someone. So in that sense, it was open. There was nothing ritualistic or anything like that. If there was, it was very open. The blessing of yourself or others, there were prayers that were done, and that's done openly, using Florida water if that needed to be done, and that sort of thing. So it's closed and it isn't closed. It depends on what aspect it is and how it is going to actually help somebody.
That makes sense. Unbelievably, we are at the 55-minute mark. So I'd like to go around the room and ask everybody what's next, what's new coming up for you, and how people can get in touch with you. But before we do that, we always like to put in a word for a nonprofit organization that is really meaningful and fits perfectly with what we're talking about tonight, and that is the Charter for Compassion. So we'll hear from our 4 guests tonight on what's next and what's new and how you can get in touch with them right after this.
The principle of compassion lies at the heart of all religious, ethical, and spiritual traditions,
calling us always to treat all others as we wish to be treated ourselves.
Compassion impels us to work tirelessly to alleviate the suffering of our fellow creatures.
To dethrone ourselves from the center of our world and put another there.
To honor the inviolable sanctity of every single human being.
Treating everybody without exception.
With absolute justice, equity, and respect.
It is also necessary in both public and private life.
To refrain consistently and empathically from inflicting pain.
To act or speak violently out of spite, chauvinism, or self-interest.
To impoverish, exploit, or deny basic rights to anybody.
And to incite hatred by denigrating others, even our enemies.
Is a denial of our common humanity.
We acknowledge that we have failed to live compassionately.
And that some have even increased the sum of human misery in the name of religion.
We therefore call upon all men and women
to restore compassion
to the center of morality and religion.
To return to the ancient principle
that any interpretation of scripture
that breeds violence,
hatred,
or disdain
is illegitimate.
To ensure that youth are given accurate and respectful information
about other traditions, religions, and cultures.
To encourage a positive appreciation
of cultural and religious diversity.
To cultivate
an informed empathy with the suffering of all human beings,
even those
regarded as enemies.
We urgently need to make compassion a clear, luminous, and dynamic force in our polarized world.
Rooted in a principled determination to transcend selfishness.
Compassion can break down political, dogmatic, ideological, and religious boundaries.
Born of our deep interdependence, compassion is essential for human relationships and to a fulfilled humanity.
It is the path to enlightenment and indispensable in the creation of a just economy and a peaceful global community.
And we're back, and so let's wrap up tonight, going around the room, and I'll put everybody on full screen. And Teresa, you might want to turn your camera, or you're maybe doing yoga, I don't know. So, because you're sideways. But Megan, go ahead and start, and let's see if I can chew gum and talk at the same time. Tell us what's new, what's going on, and how people can get in touch with you.
Okay, so you can get in touch with me a couple of different ways. You see down there my Instagram, Nightingale Tarot. I also have a website that gives a pretty detailed, who I am, services I offer, how to do that. And it is www.nightingaletarot, just like my Instagram.com. So you can get in touch with me there. And I have a Facebook page that's also Nightingale Tarot. I am faculty on the Inner Alchemy Mystery School. I teach advanced tarot and divination there. I also teach private tarot classes as well. So all of those things can be found. But, normally 9 to 5, I'll be delivering babies at Kaiser Moanalua Hospital in Honolulu, Hawaii.
All right. Thank you. And we'll put all of that information up in the info section too of the video. Joelle, how about you? What's new? What's going on? And what comes next?
So right now, I would say I'm very much in development of some things, going on my own journey. But you can find me at Joelle Adifon on Facebook, and you can also just Google me. And my website is currently down, but if you go to joelleadifon.com, you'll have a link to a coming soon page. And also, I do something called l'animazione. that is also connected there.
All right, perfect. We'll look forward to that. And Teresa, go ahead and tell us what's new. Well, we still got you. What's new and what's coming from you? Oh, your microphone's not working. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and put up on the screen how you can get a hold of Teresa just the same, since her mic's not working. You can go on Facebook to The Slavic Witch, and her name is Teresa Slawinski, and you could find out more there. And we'll go ahead and take that off. And Brian, let's go ahead and wrap up with you. What's new and what's coming?
We actually have an amazing event coming up this weekend, the 10th and 11th at Kent State University. We have the opportunity to be doing a mediumship expo. We actually have 14 readers, as well as about 25 vendors that will be there for us. It's sponsored by the shop I actually own, the Healing Brew, as well as Angel Gift Center out of Dillonvale, Ohio. Really a lot of opportunities for people to reach out. We offer classes at the shop, a lot of different things. I am going to do a shout out for the page. It's thehealingbrew.com. You can also check out my personal Facebook, or check out the page for the Healing Brew, and you'll find out how to contact me for readings, as well as for classes and everything else of that nature.
All right. Thank you. Well, thank you to each and every one of you. See, I really suck at doing this two things at once. For each and every one of you, we really appreciate it. We could have probably talked for another hour and really had some great value each one of you brought to the table. And Teresa, if you're still watching on Facebook or YouTube, thank you as well. We're going to go ahead and since I've run just a little bit over time, I won't see everybody back in the green room, but we're going to wish everybody good night. Thank you. I love and appreciate you, and all of you that are watching as well. And we'll see you in 2 weeks, the 26th, I think it is, of June. Actually, I won't be here, but Zia Angelina will be here, and my co-host Michael Torres McQueen will be here for our Pride show, which will be the last show of the season. So I won't see all of y'all until we come back in the fall. So have a fantastic and safe summer, and a wonderful, safe, and mindful Pride as well.